The gunshot echoed through the Wyoming night like a hammer striking iron, and Amelia Dawson felt her world shatter into 1,000 frozen pieces as she watched her father collapse onto the dusty street of Laramie, blood pooling beneath him in the pale moonlight of that bitter October evening in 1878. She ran to him, her boots kicking up dirt, her dress tangling around her legs as she dropped to her knees beside his still form. The outlaws who had shot him were already thundering out of town on their horses, their laughter cruel and distant. Her father's eyes were glassy, unfocused, and within moments the light faded from them completely. Amelia pressed her hands against the wound in his chest, but it was useless. Thomas Dawson, the kindest man she had ever known, was gone. The sheriff arrived too late, as he always did. The townspeople gathered around, murmuring their sympathies, but their words felt hollow and far away. Amelia sat there in the dirt, cradling her father's head, unable to process what had just happened. She was 21 years old, and in the span of a heartbeat, she had become completely alone in the world. Her mother had died giving birth to her, and her father had been everything: parent, teacher, friend, protector. Now he was nothing but cooling flesh and broken dreams. Someone tried to pull her away, but she shook them off. The tears came then, hot and fast, streaming down her cheeks and dripping onto her father's face. She sobbed without restraint, not caring who saw or heard. The pain in her chest was so acute she thought she might die from it. She wanted to die from it. Eventually, strong but gentle hands lifted her to her feet. She looked up through blurred vision to see a tall man with broad shoulders and a weathered face beneath a black Stetson. His eyes were the color of slate, serious and deep, and they held something she had not expected to see: genuine compassion. "Miss, I am so sorry for your loss," he said quietly. His voice was low and rough, like gravel underfoot, but there was a tenderness in it that made her throat tighten even more. "Let me help you get inside somewhere. You should not be out here in the cold." She wanted to refuse, to tell him she did not need anyone's help, but the truth was she could barely stand. Her legs felt like water, and the world was spinning around her. She nodded mutely, and the man wrapped an arm around her shoulders, supporting her weight as he guided her away from the growing crowd. She caught a glimpse of the undertaker moving toward her father's body, and a fresh wave of grief crashed over her. The stranger led her to the boarding house where she and her father had been staying. Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor, met them at the door with wide, concerned eyes. "Oh, that poor dear," Mrs. Henderson said, wringing her hands. "I heard the shot. Is Thomas really?" "He is gone," the man said simply. "She needs rest and something warm to drink. Can you see to her?" Mrs. Henderson nodded quickly and took Amelia from the stranger's arm, leading her up the stairs to the small room she had shared with her father. Amelia glanced back over her shoulder, wanting to thank the man, but he was already gone, disappeared into the night like a ghost. The next few days passed in a fog. Mrs. Henderson helped arrange the funeral, and the sheriff came by to take a statement, though Amelia could tell from his listless questioning that he had no intention of pursuing the killers with any real effort. The outlaws who roamed this territory were numerous and dangerous, and the law was stretched too thin to chase down every murderer. Justice, it seemed, was a luxury reserved for the wealthy and well-connected. Amelia buried her father in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Laramie. It was a cold, gray morning, and only a handful of people attended. The preacher said his words quickly, eager to get back to the warmth of his church. As the first shovelful of dirt hit the coffin, Amelia felt something inside her break even further. She stood there long after everyone else had left, staring at the fresh mound of earth that covered the only family she had ever known. She did not cry. The tears had frozen somewhere deep inside her, trapped behind a wall of shock and numbness. She felt hollowed out, like a tree struck by lightning, burnt and empty. When she finally returned to the boarding house, Mrs. Henderson informed her that her father's room had been paid through the end of the week, but after that, she would need to find other arrangements. "I am sorry, dear," the older woman said, looking genuinely distressed. "But I have other boarders waiting, and I cannot afford to keep the room empty." Amelia understood. Business was business, and sentiment did not pay the bills. She went through her father's belongings that night, trying to figure out what to do next. They had been traveling to Montana, where her father had secured a job managing a ranch. That opportunity was gone now. She had a little money, enough to survive for a few weeks if she was careful, but then what? She had no family, no prospects, no plan. The next morning, she went to the general store to purchase supplies. She would need to find work, though jobs for women in Laramie were scarce and generally unpleasant. She could sew, cook, and keep house, but the thought of becoming a domestic servant filled her with dread. Still, she did not have the luxury of being particular. As she was leaving the store, arms full of parcels, she collided with someone. Her packages tumbled to the ground and she gasped in frustration. "I am so sorry, miss," a familiar voice said. She looked up and recognized the man from the night her father died. He was already crouching down, gathering her scattered goods. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy: denim trousers, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and boots that had seen plenty of miles. "Thank you," she managed to say as he handed her packages back to her. "You are the young lady from the other night," he said, his gray eyes studying her face. "How are you holding up?" It was a simple question, the sort of polite inquiry people made without expecting an honest answer. But something in his tone made her pause. He genuinely wanted to know. "I am managing," she said, though it was not entirely true. "Thank you for your help that night. I never got the chance to properly thank you." "No thanks necessary," he said. "I am just sorry I could not do more." He hesitated, then extended his hand. "My name is William Carter." "Most folks call me Will." She shifted her packages to shake his hand. His grip was firm but careful. "Amelia Dawson. It is good to meet you properly, Miss Dawson, though I wish it were under better circumstances." He glanced at her packages. "Can I help you carry those somewhere?" She should have refused. She did not know this man, and accepting help from strangers could be dangerous, especially for a woman alone. But there was something about Will Carter that made her feel safe, something in the steadiness of his gaze and the gentle strength of his manner. "I am staying at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, just down the street," she said. "I know it," he replied and fell into step beside her. They walked in silence for a moment before Will spoke again. "Forgive me if I am overstepping, but I heard about your situation. That you and your father were traveling north when he was killed." Amelia nodded, not trusting herself to speak about it without the tears returning. "I also heard you might be looking for work," Will continued carefully. "I may know of something that could help if you are interested." She stopped walking and looked at him. "What kind of work?" "There is a ranch about 5 miles outside of town, the Copper Creek Ranch. The owner, Mrs. Patricia Thornton, is a widow who has been looking for someone to help around the house. Her previous housekeeper left last month to get married, and she has been struggling to manage on her own. The work would include cooking, cleaning, and general household management. It comes with room and board, plus a fair wage." Amelia considered this. It was exactly the sort of work she had been dreading, but it also sounded respectable and safe. "Why are you telling me this? Will shifted his weight, looking slightly uncomfortable. I work at Copper Creek. I am the foreman there, Mrs. Thornton mentioned she was looking for help, and when I heard about your circumstances, I thought it might be a good fit. But there is no pressure. If you are not interested, I understand. Why would you do this for me? Amelia asked. You do not know me. Will was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. My mother died when I was young, and my father was killed by rustlers when I was 16. I know what it feels like to be alone in the world with no one to turn to. If I can help someone else avoid that feeling, even a little, then I want to. His honesty touched something deep inside her. She blinked, feeling the sting of tears threatening again. That is very kind of you, Mr. Carter. Will, he corrected gently. Will, she repeated. I would very much like to meet Mrs. Thornton and discuss the position. His face brightened with a genuine smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his features, making him look younger and less careworn. Wonderful. I am heading back to the ranch this afternoon. If you would like, I can take you out there to meet her. Amelia agreed, and they arranged to meet at the edge of town after lunch. She spent the intervening hours packing her few belongings and saying goodbye to Mrs. Henderson, who seemed relieved that Amelia had found a solution to her predicament. When she met Will at the agreed-upon spot, he had a wagon hitched and ready. He helped her up onto the seat, and they set off down the dusty road leading west out of Laramie. The October afternoon was crisp and clear, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. The landscape rolled out before them in shades of gold and brown, the prairie grass rippling in the wind like waves on an ocean. It is beautiful out here, Amelia said quietly, more to herself than to Will. It is, he agreed. Hard land, but beautiful. You learn to appreciate the small things, the way the light hits the mountains at sunset, the sound of the wind through the grass, the smell of rain coming across the plains. You sound like a poet, she said, surprised. He laughed, a low, warm sound. I am just a cowboy, Miss Dawson, but you spend enough time alone on the range and you start to notice things. Please call me Amelia, she said. If we are going to be working together, formality seems unnecessary. Amelia, he said, and she liked the way her name sounded in his voice. They talked as they drove, and Amelia found herself relaxing in Will's company. He told her about Copper Creek Ranch, how it had been built by Patricia Thornton's late husband 30 years ago, and how Mrs. Thornton had kept it running through sheer determination after his death 5 years past. He spoke of the other ranch hands, the cattle, the challenges of ranching in Wyoming's harsh climate. His love for the work was evident in every word. Amelia found herself telling him about her own life, things she had not spoken of in years. She told him about growing up in Missouri, how her father had worked as a bookkeeper, but had always dreamed of something bigger, something freer. She told him about the long journey west, the hopes they had carried with them, and how quickly those hopes had been destroyed. It is not fair, she said quietly, staring out at the horizon. He was a good man, he never hurt anyone. Why did he have to die? Will was silent for a long moment. I do not know, he finally said. I have asked myself the same question 1,000 times about my own father. I do not think there are any good answers. Bad things happen to good people, and sometimes there is no reason for it. All we can do is keep going, keep trying to build something worthwhile out of the time we have left. His words were simple but profound, and they resonated with something deep in Amelia's heart. She glanced at him, really looking at him for the first time. He was handsome in a rugged, understated way, but it was more than that. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that made her feel less alone. Copper Creek Ranch appeared on the horizon as a cluster of buildings nestled in a shallow valley. The main house was a two-story structure built of logs and stone with a wide porch wrapping around the front. There were several outbuildings, a barn, a bunkhouse, a stable, and various sheds. Cattle dotted the surrounding fields, and Amelia could see several men working near the corrals. Will pulled the wagon up to the main house and helped Amelia down. A woman emerged from the front door, wiping her hands on an apron. She was probably in her late 50s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a bun and sharp blue eyes that assessed Amelia with a single glance. "Mrs. Thornton," Will said, removing his hat. "This is Miss Amelia Dawson, the young lady I mentioned to you this morning." Patricia Thornton's stern expression softened slightly. "I heard about your father, Miss Dawson. You have my deepest sympathies." "Thank you, madam," Amelia said quietly. Mrs. Thornton gestured toward the house. "Come inside. We will talk." Will gave Amelia an encouraging nod and headed toward the barn, leading the wagon away. Amelia followed Mrs. Thornton into the house, which was spacious and well kept but showed signs of neglect around the edges. Dust gathered in corners and dishes were stacked haphazardly in the kitchen. They sat at a large wooden table, and Mrs. Thornton poured them both coffee from a pot on the stove. "Will tells me you are looking for work. Tell me about yourself." Amelia explained her situation honestly, laying out her skills and her circumstances. Mrs. Thornton listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking a clarifying question. When Amelia finished, the older woman sat back in her chair and studied her for a long moment. "I will be honest with you, Miss Dawson," Mrs. Thornton said. "Running this ranch is more than I can handle alone. I need someone who can manage the household so I can focus on the business side of things. The work will not be easy. There is cooking for myself, and occasionally the ranch hands when we have big jobs, cleaning, laundry, mending, and a dozen other tasks. In return, I will provide you with a private room, 3 meals a day, and $20 a month. Does that sound acceptable?" It was more than fair, and Amelia said so. They shook hands, and just like that, Amelia Dawson had a new home and a new purpose. Mrs. Thornton showed her to a small but comfortable room on the second floor, with a window overlooking the valley. It had a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a rocking chair in the corner. Simple but more than adequate. "Take the rest of the day to settle in," Mrs. Thornton said. "You can start work tomorrow morning. Breakfast is at 6. After Mrs. Thornton left, Amelia sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. It was strange to think that this was her home now, that her life had changed so completely in such a short time. She felt adrift, untethered from everything she had known. She unpacked her few belongings, then sat in the rocking chair and stared out the window. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She could see Will down in the yard, talking with another ranch hand. He laughed at something the other man said, the sound carrying faintly through the glass. Amelia closed her eyes, and for the first time since her father's death, she allowed herself to think about the future. It was frightening and uncertain, but maybe, just maybe, it did not have to be completely bleak. The first few weeks at Copper Creek Ranch passed in a blur of hard work and long days. Amelia threw herself into her duties with a determination that bordered on obsession. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her days cleaning and organizing, and often worked late into the evening doing laundry or mending. Mrs. Thornton was a fair but exacting employer, and Amelia was determined to prove herself worthy of the position. The work helped keep her mind off her grief, though it was always there, lurking at the edges of her consciousness. At night, alone in her room, the loss would hit her again, and she would lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment of her father's death over and over. She saw Will frequently, though their interactions were usually brief. He would come to the house for meals or to deliver messages from Mrs. Thornton, and they would exchange pleasantries, but nothing more. Amelia noticed things about him, though. The way he treated the horses with gentle patience, how he was always the first to volunteer for the hardest jobs, the respect the other ranch hands showed him. One evening in late October, a cold snap moved through the region, bringing bitter winds and the first hints of snow. Amelia was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when she heard a commotion outside. She went to the window and saw several of the ranch hands hurrying toward the barn, Will among them. Curious, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped out onto the porch. One of the hands, a young man named Jake, saw her and called out, "One of the mares is foaling, and it is not going well. Will is with her now." Amelia did not know much about horses, but she understood that a difficult birth could mean death for both mother and foal. She hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but something drew her toward the barn. She slipped inside, the warm smell of hay and animals enveloping her. The mare was in a stall at the far end, and she could hear Will's voice, low and soothing, speaking to the animal. Amelia approached quietly and looked over the stall door. The mare was lying on her side, breathing heavily, her eyes rolling with pain and fear. Will was on his knees beside her, his sleeves rolled up, his hands covered in blood. "Easy, girl," he was saying. "Easy now. We are going to get you through this." Amelia watched as Will worked with practiced efficiency, helping guide the foal into the world. It was a difficult, messy process, and more than once she thought the mare would not make it. But Will never gave up, never lost his patience. He worked tirelessly, encouraging the mare, adjusting the foal's position, doing everything he could to save both animals. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, the foal slipped free. It lay motionless in the straw, and Amelia's heart sank. But Will was already moving, clearing the foal's airway, rubbing it vigorously with handfuls of straw. After a few tense moments, the foal gasped and began to breathe. Will sat back on his heels, his face exhausted but triumphant. The mare lifted her head, nickering softly to her newborn. It was a beautiful moment, life persisting against all odds. Amelia realized she was crying. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, and she did not fully understand why. Maybe it was relief, or joy, or simply the release of emotions she had been holding in for too long. She turned to leave, not wanting Will to see her like this, but she was too late. He emerged from the stall, wiping his hands on a rag, and stopped when he saw her. His expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Amelia," he said quietly, approaching her, "are you all right?" She tried to speak, but her voice broke. More tears came, and she covered her face with her hands, embarrassed and overwhelmed. She felt Will's presence beside her, and then his hands were gently pulling hers away from her face. "Hey," he said softly, "it is all right, you are all right." She looked up at him through blurred vision, and the kindness in his eyes undid her completely. She began to sob, all the grief and fear and loneliness pouring out of her in great, shuddering waves. Will did not say anything. He simply pulled her into his arms and held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her shoulders. Amelia clung to him, her face pressed against his chest, and cried like she had not allowed herself to cry since the funeral. She cried for her father, for the life she had lost, for the future that would never be. She cried for the little girl who had grown up without a mother and the woman who was now without a father. She cried until she had no tears left. Will held her through all of it, silent and steady. When her sobs finally subsided into hiccups and shaky breaths, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, which he gently used to wipe her face. The frozen tears on her cheeks came away on the cloth, and he was so tender about it that she almost started crying again. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I do not know what came over me." "Do not apologize," Will said firmly. "You have been through something terrible and you are allowed to grieve. You do not have to be strong all the time." She looked up at him and their eyes met and held. In that moment, something shifted between them, some unspoken understanding passing from one to the other. Will's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away one last tear. "From now on," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion, "only happy ones. I promise you, Amelia, I will do everything in my power to make sure you have reasons to smile again." It was such a simple promise, but it meant everything. Amelia felt something warm bloom in her chest, something that felt almost like hope. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and Will smiled at her. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "Let me show you the foal. She is a beauty." They returned to the stall, and Amelia watched as the newborn foal struggled to her feet for the first time, all spindly legs and determination. The mare nuzzled her baby encouragingly, and Amelia felt a smile tug at her lips despite everything. "What will you name her?" she asked. "I think that should be your decision," Will said. "She came into the world on a hard night, but she made it through. She is a fighter just like someone else I know." Amelia thought for a moment. "Hope," she said finally. "Her name should be Hope." Will grinned. "Perfect." They stood there together, watching the foal take her first wobbly steps, and Amelia realized that for the first time since her father's death, she felt something other than pain. It was faint and fragile, but it was there, a small spark of warmth in the cold darkness that had consumed her. As they walked back to the house together, Will kept his hand on the small of her back, a gesture of support and comfort that felt entirely natural. At the door, he paused. "If you ever need to talk, or if you just need someone to sit with you, I am here," he said. "You are not alone, Amelia." "Thank you, Will," she said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. After he left, Amelia went up to her room and sat by the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. For the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. And maybe, in time, she could even be happy again. The weeks turned into months, and winter settled over Wyoming with a vengeance. Snow blanketed the ranch, and temperatures plummeted. The work became harder, the days shorter, but Amelia found herself adapting to ranch life in ways she had not expected. She grew stronger, both physically and emotionally, and the raw grief that had consumed her began to transform into something she could carry without being crushed by it. Her relationship with Will deepened in subtle ways. They fell into a comfortable routine, finding excuses to spend time together. He would come to the kitchen in the evenings after the other hands had eaten, and they would talk over coffee. She learned about his childhood, his dreams, his fears. He learned about her love of books, her secret talent for drawing, her hope to someday see the ocean. Will began teaching her to ride, using a gentle mare named Daisy. Amelia was terrified at first, but Will was patient and encouraging, and eventually she found herself actually enjoying it. There was something freeing about riding across the open prairie, the cold wind in her face, the powerful animal beneath her responding to her commands. On Christmas Eve, Mrs. Thornton hosted a small celebration for the ranch hands. Amelia prepared a feast, and the house filled with laughter and music. Someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing in the parlor. Will asked Amelia to dance, and she accepted, feeling shy and excited all at once. He was a surprisingly good dancer, leading her confidently through the steps. They swayed together to the music, and Amelia became acutely aware of how close they were, how his hand felt on her waist, how he was looking at her. "You look beautiful tonight," Will said quietly, so only she could hear. Amelia felt her cheeks flush. She had borrowed a dress from Mrs. Thornton for the occasion, a deep green that brought out the color of her eyes. "Thank you," she murmured. The song ended, but they remained standing close together, neither quite ready to step away. Someone called for Will to help with something, breaking the spell. He gave her a regretful smile and squeezed her hand before walking away. Amelia spent the rest of the evening in a daze, her heart racing every time she caught Will's eye across the room. She realized with a start that she had feelings for him, real and deep feelings that went far beyond gratitude for his kindness. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about her father. He had always told her that love found you when you least expected it, when you were busy living your life and pursuing your dreams. She had not been looking for love, had not thought herself capable of it in the midst of her grief. But somehow, it had found her anyway, in the form of a kind cowboy with gray eyes and a gentle heart. The new year arrived, and with it came a stretch of bitterly cold weather. The ranch hands worked tirelessly to keep the cattle alive, breaking ice on water troughs and hauling hay to the herds. Will was gone from dawn until well after dark most days, and Amelia worried about him. One evening in late January, a blizzard roared in from the north. The wind howled around the house, and snow fell so thickly that Amelia could not see more than a few feet out the window. Mrs. Thornton paced nervously, checking the clock. "The men should have been back by now," she said. "They went out to check on the north herd this morning." Amelia felt fear clench her stomach. "How long ago?" "10 hours," Mrs. Thornton said grimly. In this weather they should have turned back long ago. They waited, the tension mounting with each passing minute. Finally, around 9 o'clock, they heard shouts outside. Amelia rushed to the door and flung it open. Several ranch hands were stumbling toward the house, covered in snow and ice. Will was among them, supporting another man who appeared to be injured. Amelia and Mrs. Thornton hurried them inside. The injured man was Jake, the young ranch hand Amelia had met her first day. He had fallen from his horse and twisted his ankle badly. While Mrs. Thornton tended to Jake, Amelia turned her attention to Will. He was shivering violently, his lips tinged blue, his fingers clumsy as he tried to remove his coat. Amelia immediately went to help him, peeling off the frozen layers and guiding him to a chair by the fire. "You are freezing," she said, her voice sharp with worry. "You need to warm up slowly." She brought him blankets and hot coffee, then knelt in front of him to remove his frozen boots. His feet were worryingly cold, and she rubbed them gently, trying to restore circulation. Will watched her through half-closed eyes, too exhausted to protest. "Thank you," he mumbled. "Hush," she said. "Just rest." The other ranch hands gradually thawed out and made their way to the bunkhouse, but Amelia insisted that Will stay in the house until he was fully recovered. Mrs. Thornton agreed, setting him up in the small guest room on the first floor. Amelia checked on him throughout the night, bringing him more blankets, warming bricks for his feet, making sure his shivering subsided. Each time she entered the room, his eyes would find hers, and the gratitude and something more in his gaze made her heart skip. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world buried under several feet of snow. Will was feeling much better, though Amelia insisted he take the day to rest. She brought him breakfast in bed and they talked while he ate. "You scared me last night," she admitted quietly. "When you did not come back on time, I thought." She could not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. Will reached out and took her hand. "I am all right," he said. "And I am sorry for worrying you, but I have to tell you, knowing you were here waiting, knowing I would see you when I got back, that kept me going out there. You are the reason I made it home, Amelia." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Will," she whispered, but she did not know what else to say. He pulled her closer, his eyes searching hers. "I know it has not been long, and I know the timing is not ideal, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel this way. I care about you, Amelia, more than I have ever cared about anyone. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing on my mind before I sleep. I know you are still grieving, and I do not want to pressure you, but I needed you to know." Tears filled Amelia's eyes, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of joy, of relief, of a heart that had thought itself broken finding the courage to love again. "I care about you too," she said, her voice trembling. "I did not think I could feel this way again, not after everything that happened. But you have been so kind, so patient, so good to me. You have helped me find reasons to smile just like you promised. I do not know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it." Will's face broke into the most beautiful smile she had ever seen. He cupped her face in his hands and leaned forward, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted. But she did not want to pull away. She wanted to be close to him, to feel the warmth of his touch, to know that she was not alone. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was a kiss that spoke of new beginnings and healed hearts, of two people who had found each other in the midst of pain and chosen to hope for something better. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Will rested his forehead against hers, and they stayed like that for a long moment, simply breathing together, savoring the closeness. "From now on, only happy tears," Will murmured, echoing his promise from months ago. "Only happy ones," Amelia agreed. Over the following months, their relationship blossomed. They were careful to be respectful, mindful of propriety and Mrs. Thornton's rules, but everyone on the ranch could see how they felt about each other. The other ranch hands teased Will good-naturedly, and Mrs. Thornton gave Amelia knowing looks, though she said nothing directly. Spring arrived, bringing warmth and new life to the ranch. The cattle were moved to summer pastures, and there was an air of optimism about the place. Amelia had been at Copper Creek for half a year, and it truly felt like home now. The sharp edges of her grief had softened into something more manageable, a bittersweet ache that she carried but no longer dominated her every moment. In May, Will asked her to take a ride with him one Sunday afternoon. They rode out to a spot he loved, a high meadow overlooking the valley. The grass was thick with wildflowers, and the view was breathtaking. They dismounted and sat on a fallen log, watching the clouds drift across the sky. Will seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hat, and Amelia smiled at his uncharacteristic awkwardness. "What is on your mind?" she asked gently. Will took a deep breath, then turned to face her fully. "Amelia, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You are smart, kind, brave, and beautiful, and I fall more in love with you every single day. I know we have not known each other for very long, but I also know that what we have is real. Life is short and uncertain, and I do not want to waste any more time." He slid off the log and knelt in the grass in front of her, pulling a small box from his pocket. Amelia's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes widening. "Amelia Dawson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Will asked, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small, perfect diamond. Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks, but they were happy tears, just as Will had promised all those months ago. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Will, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. They were both laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed with joy. They were married on a warm June day in 1879 in the small church in Laramie. Mrs. Thornton stood as Amelia's witness, tears streaming down her normally stern face. The ranch hands all attended, scrubbed and dressed in their Sunday best. It was a simple ceremony, but it was perfect. Amelia wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Thornton had helped her sew, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers. As she walked down the aisle and saw Will waiting for her at the altar, looking handsome and nervous in his best suit, she felt her father's presence so strongly it took her breath away. She knew he would have approved of Will, would have been happy to see her loved and cared for. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges life brought. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Will kissed her so tenderly that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The reception was held back at the ranch, with a feast that Amelia had spent days preparing. There was music and dancing and laughter, and for one perfect day, all was right with the world. That night, Will carried Amelia over the threshold of the small house that Mrs. Thornton had given them as a wedding present. It was a 2-room cabin on the edge of the ranch property, simple but sturdy, with enough land for them to eventually expand. It was theirs, the first real home Amelia had had since her father's death. Their wedding night was sweet and tender, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Will was patient and caring, making sure Amelia felt loved and cherished. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking about their dreams for the future. "I want to build onto this house," Will said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Add more rooms. Fill them with children if we are blessed with them." "How many children?" Amelia asked, smiling in the darkness. "As many as you want," Will said. "A whole houseful. I want laughter and noise and chaos. I want the kind of home I never had growing up." "That sounds perfect," Amelia said, snuggling closer to him. "I want that too." They built a life together over the following years, and it was everything Amelia had hoped for and more. Will proved to be an excellent husband, attentive and loving, always putting her needs alongside his own. He was a hard worker, but he never let work consume him completely. He always made time for her, for quiet evenings talking on the porch, for Sunday rides through the countryside, for simply being together. In the spring of 1880, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. She told Will one evening after dinner, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to put her down. "We are going to be parents," he said, his face glowing with happiness. "You are going to be a mother." The words brought tears to Amelia's eyes, happy tears as promised. "And you are going to be a father, the best father." Will placed his hand on her still flat stomach, his expression awed. "I love you so much," he said. "Both of you." The pregnancy was not easy. Amelia suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Will would hold her hair back and rub her back, murmuring soothing words. As she grew larger, she became uncomfortable and ungainly, but Will told her every day how beautiful she was, how proud he was of her. Mrs. Thornton and the ranch women rallied around her, offering advice and support. A room in their house was converted into a nursery, with a cradle that Will built with his own hands. Everything was ready. The baby came on a cold November night. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Amelia was certain she could not do it, that the pain would break her. But Will was there the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, reminding her how strong she was. When the baby finally emerged, wailing lustily, the midwife announced, "It is a boy." Amelia collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. Will was crying openly, unashamed of his tears. The midwife cleaned the baby and placed him in Amelia's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face of her son. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Will sat beside her on the bed, wrapping his arm around both of them. "He is perfect," he said in awe. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Amelia's father, Thomas William Carter. Amelia wished with all her heart that her father could have met his grandson, could have seen the life she had built. But in a way, she felt he was there, watching over them, proud of the woman she had become. Fatherhood transformed Will in beautiful ways. He was completely devoted to Thomas, willing to get up in the middle of the night to walk a crying baby, to change diapers, to sing off-key lullabies. Amelia would often find them together, Will talking to Thomas about the ranch, the horses, the world, as if the baby could understand every word. "You are going to grow up strong and good," Will would tell his son. "You are going to know you are loved every single day of your life." As Thomas grew from baby to toddler, the ranch thrived. Mrs. Thornton, getting older now, gradually turned more of the ranch operations over to Will. He proved to be an excellent manager, respected by the men and trusted by Mrs. Thornton. Their little house expanded, with Will adding rooms as he had promised. In 1882, Amelia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose Patricia Carter, after the wildflowers that had filled the meadow where Will proposed and Mrs. Thornton, who had given them so much. Rose was a happy, easy baby, and Thomas, now nearly 2, was fascinated by his little sister. Life was full and busy and sometimes chaotic, but it was also rich with love and laughter. Amelia would sometimes stand at the window in the evenings, watching Will play with the children in the yard and marvel at how far she had come. The broken, grieving girl who had arrived at Copper Creek Ranch was gone, replaced by a woman who was strong, confident, and deeply happy. The years passed in a blur of seasons. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Rose was spirited and fearless, always getting into mischief. In 1884, they welcomed another son, Henry, who had his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. Mrs. Thornton passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1885, leaving Copper Creek Ranch to Will and Amelia in her will. It was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. They mourned the woman who had given them both so much, but they were determined to honor her legacy by continuing to run the ranch with integrity and care. Running the ranch was challenging, especially with 3 young children, but they managed. Amelia handled the books and correspondence while Will oversaw the daily operations. They hired additional help and built a reputation as fair, honest employers. The ranch prospered under their stewardship. There were hard times, of course. A harsh winter in 1886 killed a significant portion of their herd. Thomas broke his arm falling from a horse when he was 7. Will was kicked by a steer and laid up for weeks with broken ribs. Rose came down with scarlet fever one terrifying winter, and Amelia and Will took turns sitting by her bedside, praying for her recovery. But they weathered every storm together, their love for each other and their family seeing them through. On their 10th anniversary, Will took Amelia back to the meadow where he had proposed. "You remember what I promised you?" he asked, taking her hands in his. "That day in the barn when you were crying. You promised me that from then on there would only be happy tears," Amelia said softly. "Have I kept that promise?" Will asked. Amelia thought about the life they had built together, about their beautiful children, their thriving ranch, the love that grew stronger with each passing year. She thought about how far she had traveled from the devastated girl who had lost everything in a single moment of violence. "You have kept it and exceeded it," she said, tears gathering in her eyes. "These are happy tears, Will, every single one." He pulled her close and kissed her, and it was just as sweet as their first kiss, just as full of promise and love. They returned home that evening to find their children playing in the yard, their laughter ringing through the air. Thomas was teaching Rose to rope a fence post while Henry toddled after them, trying to keep up. It was a perfect, ordinary moment, the kind that made up the fabric of a happy life. That night, after the children were in bed, Will and Amelia sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Will had his arm around her shoulders and she leaned against him, content. "You ever think about that night?" Will asked quietly. "The night your father died?" "Sometimes," Amelia admitted. "But not as much anymore. It used to be all I could think about, but now I think more about everything that came after, about how you helped me find my way back to hope." "You did that yourself," Will said. "I just held your hand along the way." "You did more than that," Amelia said firmly. "You showed me that life could be beautiful again. You gave me a reason to keep going, to keep believing in goodness. You gave me a home and a family and a love I never thought I would have. You saved me, Will." "We saved each other," Will corrected gently. "I was just going through the motions before you came along, working hard but not really living. You reminded me what it means to truly live, to love, to build something that matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the chorus of crickets, the gentle rustle of wind through the grass. "I wonder what our children will remember about their childhood when they are grown," Amelia mused. "I hope they remember that they were loved," Will said. "That they grew up in a home full of laughter and warmth. That they saw their parents work hard but also take time to be together, to enjoy life. I hope they remember that no matter what challenges came our way, we faced them together as a family." "They will remember all of that," Amelia assured him. "We are giving them everything we never had: stability, security, unconditional love. They are going to grow up strong and good, just like you told Thomas." More children followed in the years to come. Another daughter, Emma, arrived in 1888, and finally in 1891 their youngest son, James, completed their family. 5 children, each unique, each precious, each deeply loved. The house expanded again to accommodate the growing family. What had started as a simple 2-room cabin was now a sprawling home filled with bedrooms, a large kitchen, a dining room, and a parlor. It was always noisy, always busy, but it was exactly what Will had dreamed of all those years ago. Thomas grew into a young man who shared his father's love of ranching and his mother's thoughtful nature. He began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch, learning the business from the ground up. Rose had her mother's artistic talent and her father's determination, always sketching the world around her and talking about going to art school back east. Henry was the comedian of the family, always making everyone laugh. Emma was the nurturer, the one who collected injured animals and insisted on caring for them. And James, the baby, was fearless and energetic, always keeping his parents on their toes. The years of the children growing up passed both slowly and quickly, as such years do. There were school plays and birthday parties, scraped knees and hurt feelings, achievements and disappointments. Through it all, Will and Amelia remained each other's anchor, their love the foundation on which the entire family was built. On quiet evenings when the children were occupied with their own activities, Will and Amelia would steal moments alone, walking hand in hand through the property, reminiscing about their journey together. "You remember the night Hope was born?" Amelia asked one such evening, watching the horses graze in the pasture. Hope was now a grown mare, still on the ranch, the mother of several foals of her own. "How could I forget?" Will said. "That was the night you first let me see your heart, the night I realized I was falling in love with you." "I was so broken then," Amelia said quietly. "I did not think I would ever be whole again." "But you are whole," Will said, stopping and turning to face her. "More than whole. You are extraordinary, Amelia. You took a tragedy that could have destroyed you and turned it into something beautiful. You built a life and a family and a legacy that your father would be so proud of." Amelia felt the familiar sting of tears, but they were happy tears, as they always were now. "I could not have done any of it without you. We did it together," Will said, pulling her close. "That is what marriage is. Building a life together, facing challenges together, celebrating victories together. I could not imagine doing any of this with anyone else." They kissed in the fading light, their love as strong and true as it had been on their wedding day, strengthened by years of partnership and shared experiences. As the 1890s progressed, the American West was changing. The wild west of their youth was fading, replaced by increased settlement, more established law, and the encroachment of modern technology. The railroad had come to Wyoming, bringing with it new opportunities and challenges. Laramie had grown from a rough frontier town into a more civilized city. But Copper Creek Ranch remained a constant, a place where tradition and hard work were still valued, where family came first, where the rhythms of nature dictated the pace of life. It was a refuge from the rapidly changing world, and Will and Amelia worked hard to preserve that. In 1895, Thomas announced his engagement to Sarah Mitchell, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. The wedding was a joyous occasion, bringing together the community that had watched Thomas grow up. Will welcomed Sarah into the family with open arms, and Amelia gained the daughter-in-law she had always hoped for. Thomas and Sarah built a house on the ranch property, continuing the tradition of family working the land together. When their first child was born in 1896, a daughter they named Amelia Rose Carter, Will and Amelia became grandparents. Holding their granddaughter for the first time, they both cried happy tears. "Your father was right," Will said, looking at his wife with love and wonder. "Life does come full circle. Here we are, grandparents, watching our son start his own family. It is perfect." "It is more than I ever dreamed possible," Amelia said, gazing at the sleeping baby in her arms. "When I think about that scared, heartbroken girl who came to this ranch all those years ago, I can hardly believe this is my life." The turn of the century brought more changes. Rose did eventually go to art school, though she returned to Wyoming after graduating, unable to stay away from the wide open spaces she loved. She opened a small gallery in Laramie, showcasing her own work and that of other Western artists. She married a kind schoolteacher named David, and they settled in town, visiting the ranch often. Henry took after his father's love of horses and became a horse trainer, developing a reputation throughout Wyoming for his skill and patience. Emma married a young veterinarian and moved to Cheyenne, though she brought her growing family back to visit several times a year. James, the baby of the family, surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, though he specialized in land and water rights, staying connected to the ranching world he loved. As their children spread their wings and built their own lives, Will and Amelia found themselves with more time for each other. They still worked hard on the ranch, but they also traveled, visiting their children and grandchildren, taking the trip to see the ocean that Amelia had dreamed about as a young woman. Standing on a California beach in 1902, watching the waves roll in, Amelia turned to Will with tears in her eyes. "I wish my father could have seen this," she said softly. "All of it. The ocean, yes, but also the life we built, the family we have. I wish he could have known how happy I became." Will wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I think he knows," he said. "I think he has been watching over you this whole time, proud of everything you have accomplished, grateful that you found love and happiness again." "Do you think he would have liked you?" Amelia asked. "I hope so," Will said. I like to think he would have approved of how I have loved his daughter, how I have tried every day to keep my promise to bring only happy tears to your life. You have kept that promise 1,000 times over, Amelia assured him, turning in his arms to face him. I am the luckiest woman in the world. They renewed their vows on their 25th anniversary in 1904, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. It was a simple ceremony, held in the same church where they had married, but it was deeply meaningful. They spoke about the journey they had taken together, the challenges they had overcome, the love that had sustained them through it all. 25 years ago, I was a broken man who had resigned himself to being alone, Will said, his voice strong but emotional. Then you came into my life, and you showed me what it means to truly live, to love with everything you have, to build something that lasts. You are my partner, my best friend, my greatest love. I promise to continue cherishing you for all the days I have left. Amelia could barely speak through her tears. 25 years ago, I thought my life was over. I had lost everything that mattered, and I could not see a path forward. You showed me that path, Will. You held my hand and walked beside me until I was strong enough to walk on my own. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You taught me that love can heal even the deepest wounds. I promise to love you always with everything I am. There was not a dry eye in the church when they finished. Even Thomas, now a father of 3, was wiping tears from his face. The celebration afterward was boisterous and joyful, with music and dancing and stories shared late into the night. Watching their family laughing and loving together, Will and Amelia knew that they had succeeded in building something truly special. As they grew older, they slowed down but never stopped. Will still rose early to oversee the ranch operations, though Thomas had taken over most of the day-to-day management. Amelia still cooked for family gatherings and tended her beloved garden. They still took evening rides when weather permitted, still sat on the porch talking as the sun set, still held hands like newlyweds. In 1910, they celebrated their 30th anniversary. By then, they had 10 grandchildren with more on the way. The house was always full of family, multiple generations living and working together on the land they loved. We have been blessed beyond measure, Amelia said one evening, sitting with Will on the porch they had sat on countless times before. I never imagined life could be this full, this rich. It is because of you, Will said, squeezing her hand. You took the worst moment of your life and transformed it into something beautiful. You chose hope over despair, love over bitterness. That takes real courage. I had help, Amelia reminded him, smiling. A kind cowboy with gentle hands and a good heart. I just kept my promise, Will said. From that night on, only happy tears. And you have, Amelia said, her eyes glistening. Every tear I have cried since then has been one of joy. Joy at watching our children grow, joy at holding our grandchildren, joy at waking up next to you every morning. You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined, Will Carter. They sat in comfortable silence as night fell, surrounded by the land they had worked and loved, knowing they were exactly where they were meant to be. The years continued to pass, bringing both celebrations and sorrows. They lost friends and contemporaries, said goodbye to Mrs. Henderson and the old sheriff and others who had been part of their story. But they also welcomed more grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren, each new life a testament to the legacy they had built. On a warm summer evening in 1915, as the sun painted the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson, Will and Amelia sat together on their porch, holding hands as they had done for nearly 4 decades. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. You remember the first time we really talked? Amelia asked. When you offered to help me carry my packages, how could I forget? Will replied. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met, trying to be strong even though your world had just fallen apart. I remember thinking you had kind eyes, Amelia said. Even in the midst of my grief, I noticed that. Your eyes made me feel safe. I fell in love with you so fast, Will admitted. That night in the barn when you cried and I promised you only happy tears, I knew then that I wanted to spend the rest of my life keeping that promise. And you have, Amelia said, tears sliding down her cheeks. These are happy tears, Will. Grateful tears. I am so thankful for every moment we have had together. Will gently wiped the tears from her cheeks, just as he had done that first night so long ago. From now on, only happy ones, he murmured, repeating the words that had become their touchstone. Always happy ones, Amelia agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they heard laughter from inside the house, where Thomas and Sarah were putting their youngest grandchildren to bed. More family would arrive tomorrow for a reunion, filling the house with noise and chaos and love. We did well, did we not? Will asked softly. We did magnificently, Amelia replied. We took broken pieces and built something whole and beautiful. We created a family, a legacy, a love that will continue long after we are gone. No regrets, Will asked. Not a single one, Amelia said firmly. Every moment, every challenge, every joy has been worth it because I have had you by my side. They sat together as night settled fully over Copper Creek Ranch, two people who had found each other in the midst of tragedy and built a life filled with love and hope and happiness. They had kept their promises to each other, had weathered every storm, had celebrated every victory. Years later, when their great-grandchildren would ask about their story, Thomas would tell them about the cowboy who had seen a broken girl and promised her happiness, and about the woman who had been brave enough to believe in that promise. He would tell them about a love that had transformed two lives and created a family that spanned generations. And he would tell them that sometimes, in the darkest moments, hope appears in the form of a kind heart and gentle hands, ready to wipe away the frozen tears and promise that from that moment forward, there would be only happy ones. The ranch continued to thrive under the care of multiple generations. Thomas eventually passed it on to his own children, who maintained the traditions and values that Will and Amelia had established. The little cabin that had started as a two-room structure became the heart of a sprawling family compound, with children and grandchildren building their own homes on the property. Will and Amelia lived to see their diamond anniversary in 1939, an achievement that was rare and celebrated throughout the county. At 75 years old, they had been married for 60 years, had raised 5 children who all survived to adulthood, had seen 17 grandchildren and 23 great-grandchildren born. They had witnessed the transformation of the West from frontier to civilization, had seen technology change the world, had lived through wars and economic hardships. Through it all, they had each other. On their anniversary, surrounded by family that filled not just the house but spilled out onto the lawn, Will stood with Amelia's help and raised a glass. 60 years ago, I married the love of my life, he said, his voice still strong despite his age. She was young and grieving, and I was a simple cowboy with nothing to offer but a promise. I promised her that from that moment on, her tears would be happy ones. And she gave me the gift of believing in that promise, of building a life with me, of loving me even when I did not deserve it. He turned to Amelia, his eyes still that same steady gray, still filled with love. You have made every day of these 60 years a gift, Amelia. You have been my partner, my best friend, my greatest joy. Everything good in my life has come from you." Amelia stood, leaning heavily on Rose's arm, and smiled at her husband. "Well, Carter, you saved my life when I did not think I wanted to be saved. You showed me that love could heal, that hope could survive even the darkest night, that happiness was possible even after tragedy. You kept your promise every single day. These have all been happy tears." As she spoke, tears ran down her weathered cheeks, and Will reached out with a trembling hand to gently wipe them away, just as he had done on a cold night in a barn 60 years before. "Only happy ones," he whispered, and she nodded. "Only happy ones," she agreed. The family erupted in cheers and applause, celebrating not just the anniversary but the legacy of love that Will and Amelia had created. Their story had become family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of a broken girl and a kind cowboy who found each other in Laramie, Wyoming, and built something extraordinary. Will and Amelia Carter lived several more years, never spending a night apart, never taking a single moment together for granted. They passed away within months of each other in 1941, Will going first and Amelia following soon after, unable to imagine life without her partner of 62 years. They were buried on the hill overlooking Copper Creek Ranch, side by side, under a simple headstone that read, "Will and Amelia Carter, from now on only happy ones." Their descendants continue to work the ranch to this day, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the legacy left by their ancestors. And when the children of the family ask about the inscription on that weathered headstone, they are told the story of frozen tears on a girl's cheeks, and a cowboy who wiped them away and made a promise that changed two lives forever. It is a story of loss transformed into love, of grief giving way to joy, of two people who chose each other and built something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. It is a story that began in tragedy but ended in triumph, a testament to the power of love, hope, and the courage to believe in happiness even when the world seems determined to deny it. And it is a story that proves that sometimes the darkest moments of our lives are simply the beginning of something beautiful, the prelude to a love story that will echo through generations, inspiring others to believe in the possibility of happy tears and second chances, and the healing power of a promise kept.